Welcome to my presentation on Edgar Degas. So, why Edgar Degas? Well, he had a very big influence on the Impressionist style, and I love the way that he expresses movement in his paintings. As you can see in the Dancing Ballerina, the way he paints gestures and the way he uses brush strokes to very realistically portray motion is something that I find really cool. And I really like the way he uses contrast to highlight his subjects. And so, once again, in the Dancing Ballerina, you can see how the light hits her very bright and white dress amongst this very brooding background. It really highlights her. Also, how he uses complementary colors. And in the four dancers, the use of red and green is definitely noticeable and definitely... it works since they're complementary colors, and he seems to really like to use red and green or blue and orange in his paintings. In his style, you could technically call him an impressionist. He was born in 1834 and died in 1917, and he was a big part in the impressionist movement. However, he preferred to call himself a realist or an independent artist. And this was because even though he sought to capture the passing moments in life, no matter how simple or plain, but to ultimately expose the beauty in the modern world, much like the Impressionists, he did so with, he took more time and basically wanted to get more detail in his paintings. And that ultimately made him seem more like a realist and separated himself from the Impressionists. And so he preferred to paint scenes of theaters or cafes with artificial light because this contoured his subjects. And as you can see in this presentation, he painted a lot of ballet dancers. Alright, so Degas' mediums and techniques. He worked with all sorts of art forms, from paints to pastels and drawings to wax sculptures, monotypes, and even photography. And while experimenting with new techniques, he also tried reviving old mediums, such as gouache, pastel, and distemper. He wanted to go create art without the limitations of oil paints. And this was very common to use back then. Oil paints were very popular, but he wanted to kind of go further than that. And also he was inspired by Japanese prints when creating a composition or framing his paintings. And as you can see with the ballet rehearsal, the Japanese prints were very famous for their asymmetric framing and cropping, and so he uses that in this painting with the ballerinas and how they're all on this left side, and as your eye goes to the right side of the painting, you see it gets more empty and plain. Moving on to Degas' influences. He was introduced to Impressionism by Edouard Manet, and they went on several exhibitions with other early Impressionists, which ultimately promoted the art style and helped achieve its fame. And another influence was the opening trade with Japan in 1854, and this allowed Degas the access to these Japanese prints that would ultimately influence him in his framing and composition. And in the 1880s, he began losing his eyesight due to an injury he had gotten in the Franco-Prussian War, and after that he focused more on painting dancers and nudes, and then began with sculpting. And as you can see here, this is an example of his most famous sculpture, which is Little Dancer of 14 Years Old. Finally, and in summary, we have his success and legacy. So I think by far his biggest accomplishment was how he revolutionized composition and framing with the use of asymmetry that he was inspired by from the Japanese prints. And you can sort of even see this here in the dance for at the opera on the Rue Le Pelletier, with how the ballerinas are split halfway, and with the ones that are practicing and the others that are sitting down and watching or stretching. And so this is how he kind of creates this composition with a unique and different sort of balance than was common in the time. And so this kind of was another thing that set him apart from other painters. And so he helped to popularize Impressionism, which is something he's also very well known for. And finally, he captured simple and candid moments but painted with detail and care, exposing their unique beauty. And I guess I'll leave us at that. Here are my sources for everything. Sources are important. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something.